Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Neglected by Kushina and Trained by Kyuubi, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Narumi and Hikari were walking together in the forest, heading towards Training Ground 7. They were running a little late, but it was understandable. What they had seen yesterday had shocked the both of them to the core. The two of them had been prepared to deal with an angry blonde who wanted to hurt them. They had not expected the apathetic redhead that they were given. Their mother was doing just as bad as them, if not worse. She had wanted to talk to Naruto once the team members dispersed, but the shock of his appearance coupled with his new personality blew any thought of approaching him out of her mind. After the team had stumbled through their introductions, Kushina told the genin to meet at Training Ground 7 in the morning before leaving, obviously lost to the world. Minato was unable to come home early so that he could get information out of them, so the three girls were largely left to their own thoughts. There was one thing that stood out prominently in Naruto's introduction, and it was his attachment to someone who he called Hime. That was the disturbing part. According to the Sandaime, there was only one female that Naruto was familiar to that degree to their knowledge, a young woman who ran a ramen stand with her father. After questioning her and learning that the male redhead had never referred to her as Hime, they were stumped. They resolved to ask around discreetly when they had the time, hoping to see whether the girl would be good for Naruto or not. Narumi and Hikari turned to each other and released simultaneous sighs. They leapt up into the trees so that they could pick up their pace. It would not do to show up late on the first day, especially when their mother would give the slightest excuse to assign them more physical conditioning. Kushina and Kakashi were at Training Ground 7 waiting for their students to arrive. Against the norm, Kushina was not smiling. Rather, she had a small frown upon her lips. Kakashi had his normal orange book with him, but it was obvious to anyone that knew him that he was not paying attention to it. Just then, the eyes of the Jonin were drawn to the rustling bushes on the other side of the training ground. As they watched, the bushes parted as Naruto walked onto the training ground. Giving him the standard once-over, Kushina's eyebrows furrowed as she picked up a detail that she had realized yesterday, but had not hit her until now. Naruto was taller and better developed than when they had first met him. During the night in the Hokage's office, even Kushina had to admit that he looked like a shrimp. His height was only at a pitiful 4 feet 9, and his diet that consisted mainly of ramen made sure that he would not receive the necessary nutrients in order to achieve the proper build and health for his profession. Now, however, it looked like Naruto had aged 10 years. He looked like he was in his early to mid-20s, and his athletic build was easily discernible through his clothes that did little to hide his body. The build actually complemented his height of 5 feet 11 inches. His head had gone through the greatest amount of change out of all the parts of his body. Discounting his eyes, it looked like his genes had decided to flip. Whereas before he had Minato's spiky blonde hair and Kushina's round face, he now had her flowing crimson locks and Minato's more narrow face. Kushina did not want to admit it, but the new look made him look more feminine than before. She would go as far as to call him beautiful with the feminine touches to his visage. It actually caused Kushina to cringe slightly, knowing that she had helped produce a boy who looked even more girly than Minato, if that was possible. As Kakashi and Kushina watched on, Naruto strolled to a tree near them and unsheathed his claymore. Instantly on guard in case he attacked them, the two Jonin slightly relaxed themselves when Naruto stabbed the great sword into the ground and sat down, resting his back against the tree. Kushina mentally berated herself when she realized what she was doing. She might be a seasoned kunoichi, but it was no reason to doubt her son like that. It certainly wouldn't earn her any brownie points with the enigmatic redhead, which would only make it even more difficult to get close to him. The three of them continued their activities as they waited for the rest of the team to arrive, whether it would be reading smut, studying a student, or resting against a tree, semi-alert to the outside world. An hour later, the entirety of Team 7 had congregated at the appropriate training ground. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Kushina coughed into her fist, preparing herself to talk. Alright, now that everyone is here, we can start on the survival training. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out 2 silver bells, an action that was copied by Kakashi. Your job is to take one of the bells from us. If you manage to do so, then you will pass. Before she could continue, she was interrupted by the pink-haired genin on her team. Sensei, there are 5 of us on the team, but there are only 4 bells. What happens to the person who fails to retrieve the bell? Annoyed at being interrupted, Kushina was about to retort with a scathing remark, but the other Jonin broke in and answered the question, his iconic eye smile on his face. Very good for noticing that, Sakura-chan. The 4 genin who pass the test will form a team under the 2 of us. The remaining genin will be sent back to the academy for another year, and hopefully they will do better next year. Kakashi's eye smile never dropped during the explanation. The change in the mood of the training ground was palpable. Whereas before the atmosphere was serene and calm, it was now tense with the anxiety of 4 of the genin. Naruto was still resting at the base of his tree, seemingly oblivious to the world. Hikari's eyes widened slightly when she heard this, and next to her, her sister's mouth dropped open in surprise. The resident Uchiha tensed slightly and balled his hands into fists, but did nothing else. His pride would not allow him to do anything else. It was the last genin, however, who expressed her concerns vocally, momentarily forgetting her fear of her female sensei. What? But that's not fair. We worked extremely hard to get this far, and now you are saying that it was all for nothing. Once her mind caught up with her mouth, she had released what she had done and immediately paled. Rather than being angry, both Kakashi and Kushina smiled melancholic smiles, as if they were remembering something from their pasts. Pulling themselves from their memories, Kakashi put his book away as Kushina confronted her student. I am your sensei, and I decide the rules. If you do not like them, then you are free to drop out of the shinobi program. Know your place, genin. The last part of the tirade was punctuated with a small bit of killing intent, enough to make Sakura stand down. Sakura immediately paled further, and seemed to collapse into herself. Properly cowed, she collapsed onto her knees from the sheer fear that had been instilled into herself from the killing intent. Seeing this, Kushina shook her head in disappointment. The standards of the Shinobi Academy had really fallen low since her time if this was supposed to be the greatest kunoichi of her year. Her disappointment was replaced by fear when she realized that Naruto was supposed to be the dead last. How much worse were his abilities, when this kunoichi was supposed to be one of the best genin of Konoha? She was knocked out of her thoughts when she heard Kakashi place a clock on a nearby stump along with 4 bentos. You have until noon to take the bells from us. That gives you 4 hours. The person who fails to retrieve a bell will be tied to a post, and the other 4 will get to eat these bentos while the failure has to watch. Are there any questions? Learning from last time, Sakura kept her mouth shut, not wanting to receive the same treatment as last time. Seeing that no one was making a motion to ask a question, Kakashi continued. Remember to come at us with the innet to kill, otherwise you will never get a bell. The test begins now. Go. Immediately, the 4 younger-looking genin departed for the woods. All of them, even Sasuke, knew that a head-on charge against 2 Jonin would be futile. They resolved to find a good hiding place, and ambush the Jonin when they had the chance. Kushina leapt backwards and landed on one of the posts, content on letting her charges come to her. After all, they were the ones being tested, not her. They were the ones with the time limit. She wouldn't have to do anything if they didn't. Kakashi, on the other hand, was taking a proactive stance. He scanned the area for his students, and was reasonably content. Hikari and Narumi were together in a tree 100 meters to the west. Sasuke was 20 meters to the north, also nestled in a tree. Sakura's hiding spot was worth a frown. With her only 15 meters away and on her stomach, she would most likely be unable to react properly in time should he choose to go after her. However, it was his final student's hiding spot, or lack thereof, that looked the cake. He had not made a motion to leave the clearing since the exercise had started, except for standing up and picking the claymore up with his right hand. Now all he was doing was standing there, staring at his opponent. Kakashi, knowledgeable of his student's profile from the academy, knew that his student was brash and hot-headed, tending to throw reason out the window on a fly. With this in mind, he decided to taunt his student to inflame his anger. Knowing that pulling out his Ika Ika book right now would endanger his manhood via an angry Uzumaki, he decided on a verbal insult. Naruto, I know from your grades that you are neither the smartest nor the most skillful shinobi, but you could try to put a little effort into this, otherwise you will not get a bell. What kind of Hokage would you be if you failed a task this simple? He finished the taunt by projecting a bored look with what was uncovered of his face. Knowing that Naruto was about to blow up and charge him, Kakashi tensed his muscles in preparation to counter. What came next completely knocked him off guard. Instead of exploding and charging him like the silver-haired Jonin expected, Naruto's eyes only seemed to focus on him, as if he had just realized that Kakashi was there. He opened his mouth and gave a reply that nearly made Kakashi break form and face fault at the sheer irony of the statement. Did you say something? While he did not break form, he still did sweat drop. At least now I know how Guy feels when I use that statement on him. Before Kakashi could make a comment, Naruto continued. To answer your poorly veiled taunt, let me ask you a question. Why would I want to jump into a forest where I would need to worry about attacks from you and Kushina-san, as well as any traps that you may have set during the time you spent here before I had arrived? It does seem stupid. Furthermore, why would you expect me, a genin that barely passed the graduation exam and even then only on a technicality, to be able to hide from not one, but two highly experienced jonin? This only seems to be an exercise in futility, as far as I can see. Kakashi's face betrayed no reaction, but inwardly he was shocked. Normally, he would only be slightly impressed by this deduction from a genin, but this was Naruto. The kid who was famous for his trusting nature, optimism, and severe lack of intelligence. Hell, his vocabulary seemed limited to the words Hokage and ramen. There was no way that he could be mistrustful and intelligent enough to deduce something of this complexity all by himself. Repressing his shock for the moment, he decided to further question his student. So considering that you do not wish to enter the forest, what will you do now? You need to do something in order to get a bell and pass. Naruto turned around started to walk into the woods. Despite what he had said earlier, he knew that there were no traps in the forest, at least well-hidden ones. After all, it would defeat the purpose of the exercise if the team was incapacitated, and they were all supposed to be genin. As he walked away, he threw his answer over his shoulder. The bells are for those who wish to be part of the Konoha Shinobi Corps. What if I do not want to be a shinobi in service to Konoha? Kakashi stood there completely dumbfounded as he watched the retreating figure of his most confusing student. During his time knowing the former blonde, all the child would ever talk about was becoming a shinobi, and then becoming the Hokage someday. What Naruto had just said had completely destroyed the image that Kakashi had for the redhead boy placed on his team. Kakashi was so shocked that he nearly missed the shuriken that were heading towards him, intending to skewer him. Knocked out of his reverie, Kakashi managed to kawarimi with a nearby log in time. As the log took the hit, he turned around and rushed into the forest, putting his thoughts of Naruto out his mind for the moment. He had a genin team that he needed to test. Due to his hurried departure and cluttered thoughts, he never noticed the redhead woman sitting on the post behind him, a drop of water falling out of the corner of her eye. Sasuke was frustrated. He thought that he had managed to catch his sensei off guard, but all he had managed to do was hit a log. To make matters even worse, he revealed his location to his enemy. That was the reason why he was rushing through the forest, slightly panting in exertion. He needed to get ready for the inevitable confrontation, the one in which he would be triumphant. After all, he was an Uchiha, an elite of the village. Who else on this team could possibly have more skill than him? Sakura was tense with apprehension. She knew that she would not be able to get a bell from one of the genin in a head-on charge, so she decided she needed to surprise one of them. That was why she was excited when she saw Kakashi standing in a clearing, seemingly unaware of her presence. Reaching into her pouch, she grabbed a kunai and clasped it tightly in her hand. Regulating her breathing, she exhaled slowly and released the kunai in the direction of her sensei, rushing after it in an attempt to capitalize on her supposed opportunity. As she was running, she ran through a set of hand seals, causing two intangible clones of herself to appear next to her. As she approached her still immobile sensei, she her fist back, ready to punch Kakashi. When Kakashi had entered the clearing, he had immediately detected Sakura, but made no outward reaction to her presence. Instead, he had waited for her to make the first move. What he had gotten was a disappointment. Did the girl honestly believe that she would be able to catch him off guard with a single kunai and a head-on charge at speeds that were not nearly acceptable for a genin? The use of the bunshin was another sign of her ignorance, as the technique in its lonesome had zero battle applications. Kakashi brought his hand up and swiftly caught the kunai. When the Sakuras reached him, he easily discerned the real one and lifted his foot up, kicking her in the stomach. This caused her to be launched back in the direction she came from, making her back collide with a tree, which managed to drive the remaining air out of her lungs. To finish things, he threw the kunai at her, burying the blade into the tree at a point just above her head. When Sakura looked up, she let out a tiny squeak. Buried just inch above her head was her kunai, which had come so close to ending her life. When the fact registered in her mind, she fell apart. Completely terrified, she got up and rushed back into the forest, completely disregarding stealth. All she could think about was putting as much distance as she could between herself and the monster that nearly cut her life short. Now that she was a good distance away, she stopped to take a deep breath, cursing her poor stamina. Taking a look around, she was gladdened to see that she had managed to shake her pursuer. Letting out a sigh of relief, she was about to sit down and relax when she felt a tap on her shoulder from above. Looking up, she came face to face with the masked face of the one she was trying to escape. Overcome with fear and unable to do anything productive, she did the only thing she could do. Sakura released a piercing scream, one that tore through the forest and startled the nearby birds into flight from the training ground. The shock and fear etched on her face was more than enough to make her faint. Kakashi, who bore witness to this spectacle, sweat dropped. Scratch Sakura having inadequate abilities. She was nowhere prepared for the shinobi world. If her performance was anything to go by, then it seemed that the Sharingan wielder would be failing another team this year. Kakashi shrugged. At least he would have more time for his Ika Ika. Leaping away, he locked onto Sasuke's chakra signature. He was by no means a sensor nin, but he did pick up a few tricks during his tenure of service in the ANBU. It was time to see if the Uchiha Saiyan, and more importantly, Obito's last relative in Konoha, would live up to his hype. Back in the clearing with the posts, Kushina was seated with a small, happy smile on her face. What was the cause of this happiness, one may ask? Simply put, the answer was on her lap. In front of her was the food of the gods, the delicacy to end all delicacies, the paragon of all that was good and true in the world. Ramen. Usually Kushina would not eat during a time as important as this, but she needed her comfort food after what she had heard her son say. She tried to bottle it, but what he said had hurt. She knew that he had gone through hell, but it had turned her boy in a cold cynic like this. As she sat down indulging her addiction, the two siblings were crouched on a branch of a nearby tree, out of sight. The two of them wanted to get a bell, and decided that working together would make the goal at least slightly easier. While their mother was eating, they were plotting to get the bells from her. Nei-chan, what do we do? Ka-chan is scary powerful, this plan must be foolproof, otherwise he will fail. Narumi's face morphed into one of horror before she continued. Worse, Ka-chan might prank us. Hikari shuddered when she heard this. Growing up, she heard stories from her mother about all the pranks that she had pulled when she was younger. She did not want to be on the receiving end of one of those legendary pranks, especially after seeing what her mother had done to her father. Even to this day, Minato could not look at an egg beater the same way without shivering. Turning to her sister, she gave a sinister smile. Don't worry, Narumi-chan, Oni-chan has a plan. Waving for her to come in closer, she started to detail her plan. As she spoke, Narumi's eyes grew larger and larger until they greatly resembled dinner plates. Are you insane, Nei-chan? Ka-chan will destroy us for doing something like that. I thought I was the one who was supposed to come up with all the stupid and crazy ideas between us. Patting her on the head as if she was trying to placate an animal, Hikari continued. Don't worry, Narumi-chan. Just follow the plan, and we should be able to get a bell. After all, when have I ever steered you wrong? Hesitatingly agreeing, Narumi placed her right hand over her left arm and pumped chakra into a seal. A puff of smoke erupted, and when it cleared, 2 bracers could be seen. Attaching these bracers to her arms, the glove-like device covered the entirety of her forearms. They lead up to her hands and crossed over her knuckles, providing her with extra protection and power for her fists. This was Narumi's favorite weapon to use. Due to her nature, Narumi had neither the patience nor the grace to be a sword user. Instead, her Ka-chan had given her these bracers as a present for her 8th birthday. Much of the tool was covered with seals, allowing her to do many things, whether it was to protect herself or channel chakra. They even had seals that made them nigh indestructible. How cool was that? Because of this gift, the energetic redhead was able to fight people her favorite way by pummeling them with her fists into submission. While Narumi was adjusting her battle gloves, Hikari mirrored her sister's earlier action. After the cloud of smoke had disappeared, the level-headed blonde could be seen holding a violet katana. Unlike her sister, Hikari had a talent with a sword, something that Kushina had picked up on early, and nurtured with her harsh training. Because of this, the violet-eyed girl had been given her own katana, one that she hoped to surpass her mother with one day in the future. After looking over her sword to make sure that it was in proper condition, she looked at her sister, giving her a nod, a signal showing that she was ready. Narumi took a deep breath, and gave a nod back. Hikari turned around and went into the forest, preparing what she needed for their plan. Narumi reached into her hip pouch and clenched 3 shuriken between her fingers. Taking a deep breath, she threw the shuriken at her mother, racing after them. Back on her post, Kushina heard the low whistle of the ninja tools heading in her direction. Knowing that her break was over, she stretched out her hand and caught the shuriken before throwing them at the ground. Usually she would have dodged, but then the ninja tools would have hit her unfinished bowl of ramen that she wanted. The loss would have been a waste. When the shuriken had hit the ground, Kushina leapt off the post and hit the ground, just in time to catch a punch from Narumi. She then proceeded to push her daughter's fist out of the way before lashing out with her foot, intent on launching the younger redhead away. Narumi managed to pull both of her hands back to her chest in order to catch her mother's foot. Despite successfully blocking the attack, Narumi was pushed back a bit while grunting in response to the force behind the kick. She knew her mother was holding back, but she also knew that she was not going to have an easy time. Knowing that direct combat with one of the most powerful people in Konoha would be idiotic, Narumi used the momentum from the kick to push off of Kushina, and launch herself a good distance away. While her daughter was sailing away, Kushina was not idle. Instead of waiting for Narumi to land, she pushed her advantage and chased after the girl. When Narumi saw this, she inwardly smirked. The plan was already working. As Narumi was distracting her mother, Hikari was tree-hopping. When she had first left her sister, Hikari started to travel in a circle, making sure to stay just beyond the sensing range of the genin. By the time she saw Kushina chase after Narumi, Hikari had already been in position to attack. Now all she had to do was wait for the perfect opening to make her strike and finally defeat the elder redhead, even if it was not a regular sparring match. The blonde hoped that the opening would occur soon. Every second that she stayed in her hiding place was another second that Kakashi could use to find her. If that happened, then her entire plan would fall apart. As Hikari was worrying, Narumi was extremely sore. She might arguably be the most powerful genin next to her sister, but that was nothing compared to her mother. She was painfully aware that the only reason she was not knocked out yet was because Kushina was content with playing with her, pushing her to her limits. Kushina, seeing that her daughter was exhausted, taunted her, hoping to dig out that reserve of energy that she always had hidden within herself. What's wrong, Narumi-chan? Are you tired already? You haven't even managed to land a good hit on me. Maybe I have been too easy on you recently. She finished this with a look of mock disappointment before her face lit up, as if a great idea had just formed in her head. I know. You won't get any ramen today. Maybe that is the reason why you made such a bad performance today. She complimented this by pounding her fist into an open hand with her eyes closed, nodding to herself. When Narumi heard the first part, she gritted her teeth in anger, but managed to keep her temper in check. Many of her sparring matches had ended with her defeat because she had given in to her anger. However, when she had heard the second part, she froze. No one, and she meant no one, was allowed to touch her ramen. Her father had learned the hard way that she had inherited her mother's temper when he had accidentally thrown away her ramen a few years ago. Interestingly enough, after that event she learned how much force was needed to break a rolling pin. Kushina smirked when she felt the killing intent explode from Narumi. If there was something that she shared with her daughters, it was her extreme love, borderline obsession, with ramen. Minato knew not to mess with her ramen. At least, he knew that after what she had done to him when he called her beloved ramen cheap soggy noodles. He seemed to have gotten the message after she persuaded him about the greatness of ramen. It had nothing to do with the meat cleaver that she held up to his manly bits at the time. 5. She nodded to herself. Yup, absolutely nothing at all. Kushina was knocked out of her semi-deranged thoughts when she saw a fist flying at her. Dodging to the left, she proceeded to push the hostile limb out of the way, and followed up with a palm thrust to her daughter's exposed ribs. Off balance, Narumi could do nothing as Kushina's leg came flying upward, burying itself in the younger redhead's stomach. In response, Narumi went limp and fell to the ground, unable to do anything. Kushina looked down at the fallen form of her daughter with a triumphant smirk. Is that all, Narumi-chan? You spent all that time hiding and that was the best plan that you could come up with. When she said this, a sense of foreboding settled upon her. Her daughters may be Uzumaki, but even they were predictable in some cases, and this was one of them. When given the chance, Narumi never came up with a plan. Narumi was by no means stupid, but Hikari was the one who came up with the better plans. Hikari was smarter and the better strategist of the two, so where was she? Looking down at her less mature daughter, she decided to question her. It seems that even your sister has left you. Where is she, by the way? She couldn't have helped you, that plan was too pathetic to be hers. Instead of lashing out in anger like Kushina had expected, Kushina was surprised when Narumi started chuckling. The laughter got even louder until Narumi was outright laughing, her body shaking with mirth. Only after some time had she managed to calm down and catch her breath. Ka-chan, I love you, but sometimes you can be a real baka. Hikari is the plan. Before Kushina could ponder the meaning of what her daughter had said, a voice cried out from behind her, a good distance away. Freeze, sensei. If you move, then your beloved is going to get hurt. Turning around, Kushina was treated to a sight that left her speechless and eyes widened in horror. Hikari was standing at the post that Kushina had abandoned earlier in an effort to engage Narumi. Because of this, she had left her bowl of ramen unattended, something that Hikari had capitalized on. Kushina could do nothing. Her ramen, her precious ramen, was held in Hikari's hands. The bowl was held above her head, tilted precariously at an angle that nearly had some of the broth spilling over the edge. Frozen in horror, Kushina did not notice Narumi get off the ground and swipe the bells off of her waist. In fact, she only realized this when Narumi was already halfway back to Hikari, celebrating. Yay! We did it, Nei-chan. We got the bells. Your plan actually worked. Narumi was running at Hikari without watching where she was going, so she did not realize until it was too late. Unable to do anything, the two sisters collided with each other, hugging each other and jumping for joy, not seeming like they were going to stop anytime soon. In fact, they only stopped when they heard the sound of a bowl shattering on the ground. When the two of them had heard this, they froze in place. Turning around in tandem extremely slowly, they were greeted to the figure of Kushina standing before them with her face shadowed by her hair, the broken bowl of ramen at her feet. As the girls started to sputter, trying to justify themselves, Kushina's hair started to separate into 9 tails, and floated about her head. Her eyes turned completely white, and her mouth formed into a demented smile. Run, Kushina said in a demonic voice. The two children did not hesitate before turning around and rushing for the perceived safety of the forest. A few minutes later, their screams of pain and an insane cackle could be heard arising from the forest. In another part of the training ground, Sasuke was waiting for someone to show up. He had been waiting for a while, and neither one of the Jonin had shown up. This was not acceptable. He was the rookie of the year and an Uchiha, so the senseis should be stumbling over themselves to come and test him. Surely he would pass, who else could? Sakura had no chance, but the Namikaze twins would pass without a doubt. When Narumi and Hikari had introduced themselves the other day, he was intrigued. He had never shown an interest in girls, but that was because he did not like weak women. These two were powerful, so he knew that they were potential women to help revive their clan. Their pedigree was impressive, if not comparable to the Uchiha. Thinking about the Namikaze twins, Sasuke's thoughts drifted to the Dobi, Naruto. When the twins first revealed that Naruto was their brother, Sasuke refused to believe it. It was inconceivable that someone with Naruto's heritage could be so pathetic and weak. It was an insult to believe that Naruto was related to the brilliant Namikaze twins in any way, much less the Yondaime. No, Sasuke refused to believe this, so it was the Namikaze twins, not triplets. The Uchiha Saiyan shivered. That was before so-called Dobi had appeared at the team meeting yesterday. Sasuke didn't recognize him at first, but the fact that no one else knew where they were meeting proved his identity. The tall red-headed man was the idiotic, childish Dobi that he had known. The Uchiha still refused to acknowledge him, however. Before, he refused to do so because Naruto was a disgrace. Now, he refused to do so because the male redhead was a monster. The others may not have noticed it, but he did. The dude Naruto, he reminded himself, was a monster. He seemed to exude the same aura that Itachi did when he slaughtered the Uchiha clan, except to a greater magnitude. It made Itachi seem like a tame 5-year-old in comparison. If Sasuke was honest to himself, he was scared. It was as if he was a rabbit quivering in its rabbit hole, and Naruto was an amused rabbit, waiting for Sasuke to come out. Before Sasuke could continue thinking, Kakashi walked into the clearing. Banishing the thoughts from his head, Sasuke resolved to ponder this later when he had less to do. Rushing forward, he prepared to engage the Jonin. Kakashi was disappointed when he saw this. While Sakura was weak for a newly minted genin, at least she tried to devise a plan, as pathetic as it was. It seemed that Sasuke had spent no time to do this, and Kakashi decided to teach him a lesson. As the last Uchiha lashed out with a fist, Kakashi tried to push the boy away. Instead, in a display of both flexibility and agility, Sasuke flipped himself over the arm and threw a kunai in his direction. Tilting his head and letting the kunai sail past his head. Kakashi shook his head. While this attempt was better than the last one, it still was not enough to get a bell from him. Just as he was going to move to incapacitate his student, he felt a number of kunai embed themselves in his back. Just as Sasuke was going to celebrate his victory, the injured form of his sensei turned into a log with kunai embedded into the bark. Shocked by this, Sasuke could do nothing as the explosive tag on the log blew up, causing him to fly away and crash into a tree. Before he could recover, he felt two arms grabbing his feet, dragging him into the ground. If ever questioned about what had happened to him at a future date, Sasuke would claim that he had given a manly grunt. There was no way that he had released a girlish squeak. Yes, no self-respecting Uchiha would ever make such a sound. It was a manly grunt. When Sasuke's body had finally come to a stop underground, he looked up and saw Kakashi looking down at him, an eye smile on his face. Well, Sasuke-kun, that was a good try, you are different than the others. If that is all you have though, then you won't get a bell. Ya nay. Kakashi jumped away, leaving Sasuke simmering in anger. Just as he was leaving, Kakashi had to hold in a chuckle when he heard the frustrated yell coming from the clearing behind him. Overcoming his mirth, Kakashi heard the distant sound of the clock going off. So it was noon. Kakashi was actually a little relieved about this. He would normally need to go test Naruto, but he could not find him. He could not sense his chakra signature, something that would have been extremely easy only a few short days ago. Once Kakashi got back to the main clearing of the training ground, he was greeted to a peculiar sight. It seemed that Kushina had already revived Sakura, and the astounding part was the prone forms of her daughters, their bodies combinations of bruises, cuts, and blood. Unless his eyes were playing tricks on him, there were two distinct trails of smoke arising from their heads. Shaking this thought off, attributing it to the insane nature of shinobi life, he waited as the brush behind him rustled. Out of the disturbance came Naruto, who was being followed by Sasuke. It seemed that the redhead had managed to make the Uchiha angry, if the glare he was shooting at Naruto was anything to go by. Once the two of them had joined the group, the 5 genin sat around the Jonin, the 2 previously injured Namikazes somehow healed. Why, seeing that Kakashi had their attention, he started talking. Well, based on your performances, I am pleased to announce that none of you will be going back to the academy. When he had said this, Sakura started jumping up and down, celebrating since they had passed. Sasuke smirked triumphantly, pleased that he had made it. The other 3, however, were a different story. Naruto did not seem to care one way or another that they had passed, but Hikari and Narumi were wary. While they had done well enough to pass, there was something wrong. If they knew anything about Konoha, it was that it valued teamwork over individual skills. The fact that Sakura was lacking in both departments, and that Sasuke was too arrogant to even consider the latter meant that Kakashi was not finished, and that he was about to drop a metaphorical bomb. Because you all should be dropped from the shinobi program altogether. Sakura froze and fell to her knees, her hands on the ground, and her head drooped forward, her hair shadowing her face. This was a complete turnaround from how she was before. Sasuke started to scowl heavily, his agitation clear. Hikari and Narumi were confused, but they were willing to let their sensei continue, while Naruto was still seated on the ground, a distant look in his eyes. Kakashi continued, Sakura, your performance was probably the worst one that I have seen in a long time. You are supposed to be the kunoichi of the year, yet you broke and ran after your first poor attempt at ambushing me. What could make you possibly think that a regular bunshin would be enough to trick me, a seasoned jonin? If possible, Sakura drew even further into herself, ashamed. Twin trails of water could be seen running down her cheeks, but Kakashi did not care. Done with his review for Sakura, he turned to Sasuke. Sasuke, you did well, but you were missing one crucial piece that was needed to pass. Sasuke was content that he had done well, but he was still angry at the fact that he was going to be failed. He had never failed at anything, and he did not want to start now. Turning to the last student he was supposed to test, he addressed him. Naruto, your performance was the worst. At least Sakura put the effort to try and get a bell, yet you did nothing. Where were you the entire time? Naruto, snapping out of his daydream, looked up at his sensei. I was resting. Normally, Kakashi would have gone into his tirade about teamwork and then mentioned the memorial stone, but this answer stunned him. Naruto did not even try to defend himself. Instead, he turned to Kushina. And how did Hikari and Narumi do? Kushina smiled. They did well, they both worked together, and they managed to get the bells from me, even if they did spill my ramen. Her face briefly flashed with anger, but went back to the smile. Kakashi turned back to the three that he was admonishing earlier. He did not want to know how his sensei's children managed to spill his company sensei's ramen, nor did he wish to know. There was no point of poking the sleeping dragon, as they say. I will give you three one last chance to pass. You have 1 more hour to get the bells from me. Come at me with the intent to kill, otherwise you will fail. Not wanting to waste any time, Sakura and Sasuke immediately ran to the forest together, much to Kakashi's approval. Looking back, his smile disappeared as he noticed that Naruto was still standing where he was before, a contemplating look in his eyes. Before Kakashi could question why he was still standing there, Naruto questioned him. So, are you telling me to come at you with the intent to kill? Would you not get hurt if I did that? Kakashi's smile returned when he heard that. Naruto may look and act differently, but at his core he was still the brash, arrogant kid that he was before. Kakashi would enjoy taking him down a peg or two. Did he honestly believe that he could take on a seasoned jonin when he was still a wet behind the ears genin? Ma, don't worry. I am sure I will survive whatever you throw at me, so come at me with your best, okay? Kakashi closed his single exposed eye in an eye smile. This was the worst mistake that he could have made. Pain, mind-numbing pain exploded from Kakashi's chest. When he reflexively opened his eye and looked down, he saw a deep, bloody gash cut into his chest. Before his mind could fully comprehend what he was seeing, he collapsed forward, blood still streaming down his chest. Kushina and her daughters could only watch in horror as Naruto stood above the fallen form of Kakashi, his claymore released from its holder and covered with the masked Jonin's life-giving liquid. If Naruto was more in touch with his neutral emotions, he would be feeling confused right now. After his gray-haired sensei, Kakashi, he thought his name was, instructed him to attack him with the intent to kill, he did. He had expected to dodge, deflect, or even block, to live up to his boast. However, Naruto was left sorely disappointed by the quick and simple end. Instead of being given a sign of approval in response to his completion of the assigned task, he was greeted with horror-stricken faces when he turned around to question the remaining 3 members of his team. Now, instead of passing the test he had been given, he was seated in the office of the Hokage, the target of a cold stare from the leader of the village itself. Meeting the glare, neither ninja nor warrior would back down, undergoing a silent battle of wills through their locked gaze. Capitulating first, the blonde Kage closed his eyes and ran his hand through his hair, releasing a sigh of frustration. Naruto, what do I do with you? Do you have any idea what your stunt earlier today has done? Your opposition has been growing stronger even since the incidents, especially since you left a reputed jonin in critical condition. What do you have to say for yourself? Naruto took this in stride, showing no visible reaction to the tirade. His kind was always hated in their homeland, even when they were the ones who were protecting people, and the hate only turned into fear when it happened. Are you quite finished? Why am I being accused of wrongdoing when I only acted in accordance to the parameters established by my commanding officer? In fact, would not the grievous injury I cast upon Kakashi-san be a sign of success? Minato had seen many things in his life, but even this shocked him. Never before had any report mentioned the sheer callousness that Naruto displayed concerning Kakashi's health. Naruto was known to be emotionally sensitive, the type to fly off the handle easily, much like his wife. He had expected Naruto to either break down and apologize, or get angry and defend himself by repeating the same statement, "It wasn't my fault." Not this. I was told to attack with the intent to kill. I will admit that I do not follow that order exactly. If I had so, you would be interring one of your shinobi. After he had said this, Naruto's demeanor changed slightly, the only sign that he had realized something. Is that the reason for which I am seated before you? Is it because I failed at my tasking of eliminating Kakashi-san? Minato was appalled. Naruto had not intentionally done anything wrong. In fact, he had genuinely believed that he needed to kill his sensei. To make it even worse, he seemed to be awaiting punishment for holding back by sparing Kakashi. Seeing that Minato was not saying anything, Naruto took this as a sign of dismissal. Rising from his seat, he bade a terse goodbye to the Hokage and left the office, his biological father still in a state of shock. Uzumaki Namikaze House. It was quiet. This was something that never happened before. There was usually some noise that originated from the house, showing a sign of life. The source of the sound varied, whether it was Kushina taking care of the necessities within the house, Narumi's clumsiness damaging something, or Hikari chasing after her sister, making sure that she did not get into too much trouble. However, it was quiet. Kushina was washing the dishes, something that she usually did when she had something that she really needed to think about. The monotony of the task did wonders for her thinking process. Narumi and Hikari were out of the house, exploring Konoha. They had not grown up in the village, so they were spending their time familiarizing themselves with the sights and the sounds of the place that their parents and their older brother, Naruto, had spent their childhood. Naruto. Kushina gave pause when the name of her only son passed through her head. When she had first arrived after over a decade away from her son, she had been bursting with joy, ready to meet her son after so many years apart. She had expected him to be a little angry, but that was understandable given that they had never talked to him. What she had received in the office was a shock. The sheer malice and rage radiating off of Naruto was palpable. If the face of the Sandaime was anything to go by, this was an event that had rarely happened before, if ever. Since Naruto was a cheery person who was always smiling, Kushina inferred it was the latter. Seeing her little boy's medical file hurt her more than she could describe. Her son, her Naru-chan, had grown up with no one, despite what the reports had said. After her had stormed off, Kushina vowed to make Naruto feel loved, to make him aware that there would always be someone for him. If it was not his father nor his siblings, then it would be her. Kushina put the plate she had finished washing onto the rack, letting it dry. Picking up another dish and a soapy sponge, she proceeded to clean the next dish. What she had seen that morning had surprised her. Hell, it had surprised the entire team. However, she and her daughters had dismissed the physical changing, thinking that that was the extent of the change. They believed that Naruto was the same as he was before on the inside. What complete and utter fools they were. They were in denial. They did not want to believe that Naruto, the boy that they were told could not harm a fly, would be a cold and callous warrior. Despite his answers to Kakashi's questioning, they still held onto that rapidly deteriorating image. An image which shattered the moment they saw the redhead male standing over the fallen form of Kakashi, holding a bloodied sword. The worst part was not the action, nor the blood. No, it was the utter boredom that was written on Naruto's face. Given how he felt the 2 days ago in the office, they expected a look of triumph, or a look of vindication, not one that was complete apathy. Kushina set the plate aside, this time opting to pick up a cup. Running some hot water into the cup, Kushina continued her ministrations with the sponge. Now, she did not know what to do. Unlike after the meeting in the office, she could not mother Naruto. Not only had this Naruto grown into an adult, but it seemed that he did not wish for a family. When his gaze had landed on Kushina and his siblings, there was not look of anger, no look of hate. In fact, there was no abnormal reaction at all. It was as if Naruto was looking at people that he held no opinion for, that he did not know, and that was what had hurt the most. At least if he had hated them, she would have known that there would have been a chance to gain his love. After all, if he had the capacity to hate that much, he had the capacity to love as much, right? However, the lack of acknowledgement was bad. They could not regain Naruto's love and care, for there was nothing to regain. It was as if they had never existed in Naruto's heart in the first place, so there was no void for them to fill, nor a void to be filled by others. Kushina was knocked out of her thoughts by the sloshing of water moving around her hand. Focusing, she realized that she had subconsciously put the cup away, and had been searching for another dish to wash with her hands. Sighing, she set the sponge down, unplugging the drain and watched as the soapy mixture drained. Just like Naruto's care for us, Kushina thought morbidly. But it is nothing less than we deserve. After all, how can our minds possibly comprehend the sheer hell that Naruto had went through as a child while his sisters and parents lived in the lap of luxury? Hot springs of Konoha. Hikari sat in the hot springs, thankfully having a pool to herself. Her sister had decided that a species of butterfly had seemed more important, so she promptly departed in order to chase after the insect. Hikari loved Narumi, and respected her strength, but even Hikari had to admit that her sister would be a bit of an airhead at times. Stretching out her limbs, Hikari released a sigh of relief as she felt the knotted muscles and soreness melt away. Her mother had not been forgiving during the test in the morning, especially after the two of them had managed to defile her ramen, as Kushina liked to put it. Sometimes, Hikari thought, Ka-chan can be even more of an airhead than Narumi. And I didn't even think that was possible. Thinking of her mother and her sister, Hikari's thoughts drifted towards that of the other family member that had partook in her test. When Hikari had first seen Naruto, she could not shake off her disappointment. This was supposed to be her older brother. This shrimp wearing a nauseating amount of orange with a grin that betrayed his lack of intelligence was supposed to be the person that she was to look up to as a role model. She did not know whether to be angry at the amount of shame he would bring to the family, or laugh at the sheer absurdity of the thought altogether. Now she could not tell who was better. The orange-wearing shrimp may had been an idiotic weakling who was obviously in over his head, but he seemed to be the dependable sort of person, the person who would never abandon you, so long as you give the slightest of kindnesses. He also had a lot of untapped potential, potential that almost equaled, if not rivaled, that of herself and Narumi. Now all she could see was a cold, merciless warrior. If the look in his eye was anything to go by, then he had grievously injured people in the past, and possibly even killed a great number of others as well. It was the feeling of his energy, however, that shocked Hikari the most. Much like other members of the Uzumaki clan, there are some traits that appear only in certain members of the Uzumaki clan. For her mother, it was her adamantine sealing chains. For her, it was her mind's eye of Kagura. This technique, when properly mastered, allowed the user to sense chakra to such a degree that the user was able to distinguish emotions, truths from falsehoods, and even the personalities of people from their chakra alone. When she was around her father, she got the sense of calm and composure. When she was around her mother, she got a sense of childishness, tempered by the maturity of being a mother. She had never tried to actively sense what Narumi's personality was like when she was acting like she was now. Hikari did not believe her sanity could survive such exposure. However, when she had sensed her brother, there was nothing there. Yes, there was a source of energy. It was highly similar to chakra but slightly different, something that Hikari attributed to Naruto's connection with the Kyuubi. It was his personality aura that alarmed her. Unlike others, who embodied an emotion or a set of emotions, Naruto embodied nothing. He was nothing. Hikari would be able to find Naruto easily by just distinguishing the void that he caused. This void was different than nature, which exuded an aura of neutrality. When Hikari had first met Naruto, she felt childishness, curiosity, warmth, and suppressed pain radiating off of him. What happened within the span of 12 hours that drastically changed Naruto from something brimming with life into something that was the epitome nothing? Hikari told nothing of her findings to anyone else. Narumi, despite being her sister, would not understand the ramifications of what was happening, if she even understood Hikari's explanation. Her father already had enough on his plate, dealing with various problems that the village faced. There was no need to add more to that. Kushina, despite her attempts to hide it, was close to an emotional wreck. This might be the final piece that would be enough to push her over the edge. There was no need to test that theory. Hikari stood up, water splashing onto the stone shores of the heated pond. Climbing out of the pool, she shivered before quickly slipping into a warm robe. Leaving the hot springs, she started on her trek home. She had a lot of questions, and she wanted answers. Nearby forest. In a clearing in the forest near the hot springs, a group of butterflies were mingling, the picture of peace of tranquility. That was swiftly broken when an explosion tore through the clearing, incinerating the pacifistic creatures. What kind of sick, twisted, inhumane creature would do this? What kind of monster would destroy the peace that these small animals had strived for so long to achieve? What kind? Butterfly? No. Bounding into the clearing was one Narumi Uzumaki Namikaze. Her eyes widened in horror of the small butterfly she had just killed. She wanted to throw a kunai at the little bugger to scare it, but she didn't see the explosive tag attached to it. She landed on the ground pouted heavily, stomping her foot on the ground. She had worked so hard in chasing that butterfly. She had even left her sister behind, who was speaking about something that sounded important. Narumi had just tuned her out, an art that she had perfected during the days that she had to stay inside during the storms. Crying anime tears, Narumi fell to her knees and started beating the ground. Just as she was going to devolve further into her misery, a butterfly flew past her face, and further into the forest. Butterfly. Her previous sadness forgotten, Narumi quickly leapt to her feet and chased after the butterfly. Yeah, sometimes it would be better not to know what Narumi was thinking. It might be better for everyone's sanity. It was sad, really. Narumi was the one who took after Kushina the most in the personality department, but her current state was caused by a mental defect that formed due to her connection to the Kyuubi. This was her defense mechanism. Whenever she was faced with emotional strife such as the situation with her brother, she turned innocent, almost childlike in nature. When she was like this, her family learned two things. First, don't try to reason with her when she was like this. She had zero reason, and grew chaotic when pushed. Second, never do anything that would upset her. The last time that had happened, she had to be restrained by her mother's chains and knocked out. She had not woken up for 3 days. Another explosion could be heard a distance away, accompanied by a cry of sadness and frustration. Naruto was in another area of the village, in a forest much like Narumi. However, this forest was different than the one his estranged sister was currently frolicking in. This was Training Ground 44, Konoha's infamous Forest of Death. To Naruto, that was a misnomer. How was this a forest of death? Sure, they had poisonous plants and giant, carnivorous animals, but the death toll was not high. In fact, there had not been a death in this forest within the last 20 years, and even then it was a foolish civilian who did not heed the warnings pasted all over the border fence. Stupid humans and their stupid pride. Did they make it their life's goal to do the stupidest and most dangerous things possibly until they are finally killed? After his interrogation at the Hokage's office, Naruto swiftly made his way to this training ground. Despite the lack of deaths in the Sylvan land, the rumors of the forest kept most people away. Even then, the only person who truly frequented the forest was a seemingly promiscuous snake user, who was currently out on a mission. Having no human in the immediate vicinity, Naruto chose to take up residence in the tower for the time being. If any civilian caught wind of what he had done to their Jonin, they would be up in arms against him. He had no desire to explain to his father why there was blood and gore splattered all over his front doorstep, along with the corpses of a would-be lynch mob. My father, Minato and the rest of his family was something that Naruto would not understand. They tried with great effort to get him to forgive them, but he saw no reason as to why. Before the test in the morning, they thought that he was a weakling. Even now, they only believed that he had managed to catch Kakashi by surprise, no more skilled than an experienced chunin. No, it was not his strength they were after. Logic dictated that they would be placing too much effort for too little of a reward. What else could it be? In their eyes, he had no special power like that of Hikari and Narumi. To them, he was just another aspiring shinobi. No, there was no special trait, no keke genkai that he held that would be useful to the village. The skills that he had were unique solely to him. The blonde Kage called him his father, but what did that mean? Growing up the way that he did, he had no room for love or compassion. The few relationships that he had were with his instructors, and even then they were few and fleeting. They rotated every week, so it was not like he had the time to get attached to them. Their hands-on method of training only made them less inviting. In his journeys, he had viewed many of these fathers from a distance. He did not see what made them different than the rest of the adult males around them. They all varied in height, strength, and demeanor, but usually had no more strength or ability than a fellow male. Was it the child that they had with them? Those children managed to either brighten their day or make it worse, but other than that they had no meaning. They seemed to share an emotional bond, but how far would that bond go? He had seen many children abandoned to the flesh-eaters by fearful fathers. He would have continued to ponder his dilemma, if it were not for the two arms that circled his waist. For most people, this would have been met with a violent response, but not for her. Continuing his silent vigil, he waited for the woman to address him. He was not disappointed when he felt a shapely body press up against his back, and a soft, sensual voice greeted his ears. "What bothers you, beloved? You would have at least greeted me by now. You even have that distant look in your eye, that look that tells me something has happened." She then pulled herself flush against his body. "Please tell me," she crooned. Naruto made no reaction. While the first few times her actions had made him uncomfortable, he had grown used to it. Over time, the temptation had grown onto him, and it had become his guilty pleasure. After allowing himself to bask in the warmth and pleasurable feelings that the actions of the seductress behind him offered, he replied, "It is nothing that should concern you." Naruto could sense the frown that marred the beautiful face behind him. Opting to grind her body against the male, the woman tsked in annoyance. "Beloved, you should know by now that that is not the way that things work. I ask you a question, and you answer wholly and completely." Shrinking into herself, she put on a mask of sadness and fear, something that Naruto saw through immediately. "Or do you finally grow tired of me? Has all I have done mean so little to you?" The claymore released a sigh, something that was almost one of frustration or exasperation, his gaze softening. "You know that that is not true, my Heim. You were always there for me, and you were there when I needed you the most. I treasure you above all things in this world and the next." When he finished this, his eyes hardened as he twisted in the grip of his captor, staring unflinchingly into her eyes. Releasing a small bit of yoki in an attempt to intimidate his companion, he continued. "However, do not think that I am answerable to you, nor that I am underneath you. My secrets that I hold are mine alone, and you may not intrude upon them with impunity." Instead of getting angry, the interloper grew amused. Reaching out with her hand, she gently caressed Naruto's cheek. "That is what I wanted to see. You are not afraid to stand up for yourself, even against someone as powerful as myself. Were you not the one who said that you were not confident in your ability to defeat me? What changed?" Naruto's gaze remained hardened, his steely calm voice not betraying anything. "Things change. I changed. I have found something that you may find interesting." When the woman realized that Naruto would not speak further about the topic, she laughed. When the red-headed warrior heard the laugh, he shivered. This was not a shiver of fear nor pleasure, but of something more. The laughter was beautiful, but only in an ethereal sense, as if it were something that could not be found on the earth. Given the nature of the woman, that was understandable. Pulling Naruto forward by the hand that was still on his cheek, she pressed her lips against his, granting him the warmth and comfort that he desperately craved. The warmth and comfort that only she could provide. Pulling herself back, she noticed that Naruto's hands were wrapped around her waist. Releasing herself from the embrace of her lover, she leapt to the ledge, giving Naruto one last look, one last challenge, and departed. Naruto knew what that look meant. There was going to be another clash between the two soon, and given what he had recently discovered, it was going to be one that would larger than any battle the two of them had shared before. The woman seemed otherworldly, yet Naruto felt that he could connect with her. They both were lone warriors who stood at the apex of power, and before meeting each other, had no one who could push them. Turning around, he gave one last look to the place where his closest acquaintance, rival, and lover had stood mere moments ago. Walking away, he spoke one last time to her, even though he knew that she would not be able to hear. I look forward to our next clash as well, Haim-chan.